She thought her secret was safe, until the messages she never sent started replying back. Amelia adjusted the emerald green silk dress on the mannequin, her hands moving with practiced precision. The atelier buzzed with the low hum of sewing machines and hushed conversations of assistants, but her focus was unshakable. This dress, her piece de resistance, was destined for the Grand Parisian runway next month. Every stitch symbolized the success she had meticulously built, the empire she and Ethan had nurtured together. Ethan entered quietly, his tailored suit blending seamlessly into the luxurious surroundings of the studio. He always carried an air of calm confidence, a man who had conquered the world of tech and made it look effortless. Yet his most prized achievement, he often said, was Amelia. "You'll steal the show," he said, leaning in to kiss her on the cheek. The warmth in his voice was genuine, as was the pride in his eyes. Amelia smiled, the kind of smile that photographers adored, radiant yet elusive. "I couldn't do it without you," she replied, her voice honeyed. And she meant it, in a way. Ethan had been her rock, funding her dreams when they were nothing more than scribbles in a sketchbook. He had believed in her when no one else did. Their life was a magazine spread come to life. Lavish galas, champagne toasts, and romantic getaways that drew envy from their peers. To the outside world, they were the epitome of a power couple. Ethan's tech empire provided the means, and Amelia's artistry gave them the spotlight. Together they were unstoppable, or so it seemed. But beneath the polished veneer, shadows loomed. Amelia's eyes lingered too long on certain models during fittings, her laughter a touch too warm during after-hours gatherings at the studio. Ethan noticed these things, though he dismissed them as quirks of her artistic temperament. He trusted her implicitly. As Ethan left the studio to head back to his office, Amelia exhaled. She loved him, at least she told herself she did. But love, she reasoned, wasn't always enough to quench the thirst for inspiration, for excitement, for the thrill of being desired. She glanced at her phone, where an unread message glowed faintly on the screen. A name flashed briefly before she locked the device, her lips curving into a secret smile. To everyone else, Amelia and Ethan were the perfect couple. But perfection, as she knew all too well, was often just an illusion. The studio dimmed as the last assistant left for the night, the sound of their footsteps fading into the Parisian streets. Amelia remained behind, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The message she'd received earlier burned in her mind, tempting and dangerous. She unlocked her phone and read it again. "Can't stop thinking about last time. When can I see you again?" The sender was Marco, one of her lead models. He was impossibly handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a magnetic energy that seemed to fill every room he entered. During fittings, his touch lingered just a second too long. His compliments came with a spark that ignited something deep inside her, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. It had started innocently enough, or so she told herself. Late-night conversations about art and beauty had turned into lingering glances, stolen moments, and eventually, heated encounters in the privacy of her studio. Marco was her muse, a living embodiment of the passion she poured into her designs. But their relationship went beyond the professional. It was electric, intoxicating, and entirely forbidden. Amelia hesitated, her finger hovering over the keyboard. She knew the risks. If Ethan found out, it would destroy everything. Yet the thrill was irresistible. Marco made her feel alive in ways Ethan, with his steady devotion, never could. She typed a reply. "Tomorrow after the final fitting. Same time, same place." The message sent. She leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. She glanced at the emerald dress on the mannequin, its perfection a sharp contrast to the chaos within her. Her gaze shifted to the framed photograph on her desk. It was of her and Ethan, taken during a summer holiday in Santorini. They looked so happy, so in love. Amelia swallowed hard, guilt pressing down on her like a weight. But as quickly as it came, she pushed it aside. "This isn't about love," she whispered to herself. "It's about inspiration." She turned off the lights and left the studio, the echo of her footsteps filling the empty space. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would balance it all again. the life she had with Ethan and the secret world she shared with Marco. For now, the line between the two felt thin, fragile, and dangerously close to breaking. Ethan sat in his home office, the glow of multiple monitors reflecting off his glasses. His latest project, a revolutionary AI security system, demanded his attention, but his mind wandered to Amelia. She had seemed distant lately, preoccupied in a way he couldn't quite place. He dismissed the thought. "She's stressed about the show," he muttered to himself, tapping away at the keyboard. Yet a nagging unease lingered. As a tech innovator, Ethan prided himself on his ability to detect patterns, whether in code or in people. And lately, Amelia's patterns had changed. The late nights at the studio, the guarded expressions, the way she'd pull her phone away when he entered the room. All of it set off alarms in his mind. He shook his head, chastising himself for being paranoid. Trust was the foundation of their relationship, and he had no reason to doubt her. But then again, doubt had a way of creeping in when you least expected it. Unable to resist, Ethan accessed the home server that automatically synced all devices in the house. It was a habit born of his profession, keeping everything interconnected for efficiency. He navigated to Amelia's files, a place he had rarely ventured out of respect for her privacy. As he browsed, a folder caught his eye. Inspiration. It was innocuous enough, but something about it felt off. The folder had been updated recently, and its contents were hidden behind an extra layer of encryption. Curiosity turned to suspicion. Amelia had no reason to encrypt her work files. She often shared her sketches and ideas with him. With a few keystrokes, Ethan bypassed the security. What he found sent a chill through him. Photos of Marco. Not just professional shots, but candid ones, him laughing, leaning casually against a wall. His shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a chiseled chest. There were also messages, saved screenshots of conversations. Some were harmless, others intimate. Ethan's stomach churned as he read the words. "You make me feel like no one else ever has. I'll be thinking of you tonight." His hands clenched into fists, the pain of betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. His mind raced, torn between anger and disbelief. Amelia, his wife, his partner, the woman he had built a life with, was sharing herself with someone else. But Ethan wasn't the kind of man to act impulsively. He closed the folder, his breathing steadying as a grim resolve settled over him. If Amelia thought she could keep secrets, she had underestimated him. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. First, he needed to know everything. And then, he would make her pay. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. As he lay in bed, his eyes traced the shadows dancing across the ceiling. Next to him, Amelia slept soundly, her breathing soft and steady. The contrast between her serene exterior and the storm brewing inside him was unbearable. Every time he closed his eyes, the words and images from her secret folder replayed in his mind. The intimacy of her messages, the way Marco looked at her in those candid photos. It was a betrayal far deeper than he had ever imagined. By morning, Ethan had made up his mind. He needed answers. At breakfast, the tension between them was palpable. Amelia sipped her coffee, flipping through a magazine as though nothing was wrong. Ethan watched her, searching for cracks in her facade. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've been spending a lot of late nights at the studio." Amelia didn't look up. "The collection has to be perfect. You know how demanding the clients are." "Of course," he replied, his voice calm. "But it's not just the work, is it?" She froze for a fraction of a second, a subtle hesitation, but Ethan caught it. She recovered quickly, meeting his gaze with a puzzled expression. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, leaning forward, "I found some of your inspiration files." The color drained from her face. Her coffee cup clattered against the saucer as she set it down. "You went through my files? Don't try to turn this on me," he said, his tone sharp. "What's going on between you and Marco?" Amelia's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked unsure of herself. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," Ethan demanded. She hesitated, her mind racing for an explanation. "He's just a model." We've spent time together because he inspires my work. But that's all it is. Artistic collaboration. Ethan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Artistic collaboration? Is that what you call those messages? The ones where you told him you'd be thinking of him tonight. Amelia's eyes widened, panic setting in. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Ethan interrupted. You've been lying to me, betraying me. Her voice rose, defensive now. It wasn't physical. Not really. It didn't mean anything. Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Don't insult me by pretending this was meaningless. You made a choice, Amelia, and you're going to regret it. Before she could respond, he walked out, slamming the door behind him. Amelia sat frozen at the table, her hands trembling. She had always thought she could control the situation, keep the lines between her double life from crossing. But now, everything was unraveling, and for the first time, she was truly afraid of what Ethan might do next. Ethan drove aimlessly through the city, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. His mind raced with memories of their life together. Vacations, quiet nights at home, celebrations of their successes. Every moment now felt tainted, overshadowed by Amelia's betrayal. Pulling into a quiet park, he turned off the engine and sat in silence. His initial anger had cooled, replaced by a bitter sense of clarity. He replayed their conversation at breakfast, dissecting her every word and expression. It wasn't physical, she'd said, but the messages he'd read, the photos he'd seen, told a different story. Even if it hadn't started as physical, it was only a matter of time. She'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. Ethan took out his phone and opened the encrypted app connected to the surveillance system he'd discreetly installed in their home and studio months ago. He had set it up to ensure Amelia's safety when she worked late, but now it served a far more personal purpose. Scrolling through the footage, he found what he was looking for. Amelia and Marco. Their interactions during fittings were professional on the surface, but there were moments, lingering touches, private smiles, whispered conversations, that revealed the truth. Then he saw it, footage from just 2 nights ago. The studio after hours. Amelia and Marco standing close, their bodies pressed together. She whispered something in his ear, and he laughed before pulling her into a kiss. Ethan's stomach twisted as he watched. He had hoped, even after their argument, that her betrayal was limited to flirtation or emotional infidelity. But now there was no doubt. She had lied to his face, and she had done it so easily. His thumb hovered over the save button, capturing the footage. It wasn't just proof of her betrayal. It was ammunition for the revenge he was beginning to plan. But revenge wouldn't be enough. He didn't just want to hurt her. He wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the depth of the pain she had caused. And to do that, he needed to be patient. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind sharpening into focus. He would confront her again, but only when the time was right. Until then, he would continue gathering evidence, building his case. As he started the car and drove back toward home, a dark determination settled over him. Amelia had made her choice. Now it was his turn. Ethan returned home late that evening, his mind swirling with ideas. Revenge wasn't just about retribution, it was about precision. He needed to make Amelia feel the depth of his betrayal, but more importantly, he needed her to realize the consequences of her actions. Sitting at his desk in the home office, he began sketching the outlines of a plan. Years of working in the tech industry had given him access to tools most people couldn't even imagine. Surveillance, artificial intelligence, biometric tracking, these were his specialties, and he intended to use every resource at his disposal. First, he reviewed the saved footage of Amelia and Marco, cataloging each interaction. He noted the times, the places, and the patterns of their rendezvous. Every detail painted a clearer picture of their affair, fueling the fire in his chest. Next, he turned to his AI system, one of his most prized inventions. It was designed to analyze human behavior, predict responses, and simulate interactions with uncanny accuracy. Ethan began feeding it data, recordings of Amelia's voice, messages she had written, and even her facial expressions from their shared photos. By the time he finished, the AI had created a flawless digital replica of Amelia's personality. Ethan stared at the screen, a cruel smile forming on his lips. The first piece of his revenge was complete. But that was just the beginning. He envisioned a plan that would dismantle Amelia's life piece by piece. It wouldn't be a sudden explosion. It would be a slow, deliberate unraveling. She would feel the same helplessness, the same pain that she had inflicted on him. The next step was isolating her. He began drafting emails and text messages, carefully crafted to sound like her. These messages would be sent to Marco and her closest colleagues, subtly sowing seeds of doubt and mistrust. Ethan's fingers flew over the keyboard, his focus unbreakable. He wasn't just acting out of anger. He was building something intricate, something unstoppable. Amelia had chosen her path, and now she would walk it to the end. When he finally closed his laptop, the room was silent. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion tugging at his eyelids. But as he stared out the window at the city lights, he felt something he hadn't felt in days. Control. This was only the beginning. The next day, Ethan's demeanor was calm, almost cheerful. Over breakfast, he chatted with Amelia about her upcoming runway show, offering supportive comments and pretending as though their argument had never happened. Amelia seemed cautious, as though waiting for the other shoe to drop, but Ethan's composed exterior lulled her into a fragile sense of security. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, sipping his coffee. "I want to support you more. Maybe get more involved in your creative process." Amelia blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Of course," he said smoothly. "I know I've been busy with work, but I don't want you to feel like you're doing this alone." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "That means a lot to me." Later that day, Ethan visited her studio under the pretense of offering help. He brought a small gift, a sleek tablet loaded with a cutting-edge design app he claimed would revolutionize her workflow. "What's this?" she asked, accepting the device. "It's something I've been developing," Ethan explained, smiling. "You'll be the first to use it. Think of it as a way to streamline your ideas and keep everything organized." Amelia looked touched, her earlier guilt resurfacing. "Thank you. This is thoughtful." "Anything for you," he said, brushing a kiss against her cheek. What Amelia didn't know was that the tablet wasn't just a design tool. It was outfitted with sophisticated tracking software, capable of logging every keystroke, recording audio, and even capturing video through its front-facing camera. Ethan now had direct access to her work, her conversations, and her most private moments. As she began using the tablet, Ethan monitored her activity from his home office. He watched as she exchanged flirtatious messages with Marco, their interactions laced with double meanings and barely veiled desires. But Ethan wasn't content to merely observe. He began subtly manipulating her messages, altering her words just enough to create tension. Messages that once read as playful now carried an edge of possessiveness, leaving Marco confused and slightly distant. It didn't take long for Ethan's interference to bear fruit. One evening, he intercepted a message from Marco. "I feel like something's changed. Are you upset with me?" Amelia frowned at the screen, unsure how to respond. Ethan smirked from his office chair, knowing that doubt was beginning to creep into their relationship. By the end of the week, the cracks were undeniable. Marco's replies grew less frequent, his enthusiasm waning. Amelia, meanwhile, became increasingly frustrated, sensing something was wrong but unable to pinpoint what. Ethan watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. The trap had been set, and Amelia was walking right into it. The days turned into a blur of frustration and confusion for Amelia. The once electric exchanges with Marco had dwindled to curt, almost indifferent replies. She replayed their messages, searching for where things had gone wrong. Ethan, meanwhile, played the role of the supportive husband to perfection. He would kiss her goodbye each morning, offer thoughtful compliments about her designs, and bring her coffee during her late-night work sessions. His calm demeanor only deepened her guilt, a constant reminder of the secret she carried. But beneath his facade, Ethan was pulling strings, tightening his web of control. He ramped up his manipulations, intercepting and rewriting Amelia's messages with increasing precision. Marco's confusion turned into frustration, and then suspicion. One night, Ethan intercepted a particularly damning message. "I don't know what game you're playing, Amelia, but I'm done." Amelia stared at the message on her tablet, her heart sinking. She quickly typed a reply. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." But Marco didn't respond. Hours passed, and the silence was deafening. She tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. Amelia felt the walls closing in. Marco had been her escape, her secret refuge from the pressures of her life. Without him, the weight of her double life felt unbearable. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan was watching every moment. He observed her attempts to reach out, her growing desperation, and he knew it was time to take the next step. The following day, Ethan planted the final piece of his plan. Using the AI replica of Amelia's voice and personality, he crafted a series of messages to Marco. These messages would sever their connection completely and push Amelia into a spiral she couldn't escape. The messages were cruel, laced with accusations and insults that Amelia would never have said. By the end, Marco's replies were filled with anger and finality. "I can't believe I ever trusted you. Don't contact me again." When Amelia read the messages later that night, her world shattered. She couldn't understand how Marco could have misunderstood her so completely. She tried calling him again, but the line was dead. Ethan watched from his office as Amelia sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. He felt a flicker of satisfaction but also a strange emptiness. The woman he had loved was breaking before his eyes, and while it was her betrayal that had set this in motion, he couldn't ignore the weight of his own actions. But it wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning of her descent. Amelia's life began to unravel. Marco's absence left a void that gnawed at her relentlessly. She became consumed by the unanswered questions, replaying their interactions and messages in her mind, searching for a clue to what had gone so terribly wrong. Her work suffered. Deadlines loomed, but her creativity felt stifled. The once brilliant designs that flowed from her fingertips now seemed lifeless. Her assistants whispered behind her back, sensing her distracted state, but Amelia didn't care. Ethan watched it all with a detached sense of satisfaction. He hadn't just orchestrated Marco's exit. He had planted seeds of doubt in Amelia's world, and they were beginning to take root. The tablet became his most potent weapon. Using its front-facing camera and microphone, Ethan began introducing subtle manipulations into Amelia's environment. Voices whispered faintly when she was alone in the studio. Notifications would pop up and then disappear before she could read them. One evening, as she worked late, the lights in the studio flickered. Her tablet screen glitched, showing distorted images of Marco's face. His expression twisted in anger. Amelia gasped, nearly dropping the device. "What the hell?" she muttered, her heart racing. The image vanished, replaced by her normal workspace. She stared at the screen, unsure if she had imagined it. The stress was clearly getting to her, she thought. But the incidents didn't stop. Over the next few days, her phone would ring with no one on the other end. Emails she didn't remember sending appeared in her inbox as replies. The messages were cryptic, fragmented. "Why did you do this to me? I trusted you. You'll regret everything." Ethan had programmed these subtle intrusions to mirror her own guilt and paranoia, using the AI to anticipate her reactions and escalate accordingly. Amelia began questioning her own sanity. She confided in Ethan one night, her voice trembling. "I think someone's messing with me. Or maybe I'm just losing it." Ethan pulled her into a reassuring embrace, hiding his smirk. "You've been under so much pressure lately," he said gently. "Maybe you just need a break." She nodded, but her unease lingered. The once solid foundation of her reality was crumbling, and she couldn't tell if it was her mind betraying her, or something far more sinister. Ethan, meanwhile, prepared the next phase of his plan. He wouldn't just distort her reality. He would shatter it completely. Amelia's days turned into a haze of confusion and fear. The eerie glitches, mysterious messages, and phantom voices became more frequent, pulling her deeper into paranoia. The studio, her sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound carried a sinister undertone. At night, she would lie awake, clutching her phone, scrolling through old messages from Marco, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. The distorted notifications continued, mocking her attempts to make sense of her crumbling reality. One evening, as she worked on a dress alone in the studio, the tablet screen flickered and turned black. Before she could react, a video began to play. It was footage of her and Marco, their intimate moments captured in sharp detail. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The video stopped abruptly, replaced by a message. "You thought you could keep secrets?" She scrambled to turn the tablet off, but the message lingered, the screen unresponsive to her touch. Her chest tightened as panic set in. Who had this footage? How had they gotten it? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was Marco behind this? Had someone hacked into her devices? She grabbed her phone and called Marco, but the number was still disconnected. The video disappeared, replaced by a single phrase in bold, flashing letters. "You'll pay for what you've done." Terrified, Amelia fled the studio and drove home, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Ethan was in the living room when she burst through the door, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Ethan," she gasped, "someone's targeting me. They have footage of me and—" Her voice broke, unable to finish the sentence. Ethan stood, his face a mask of concern. "What footage? What's going on?" She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know. It's like someone's watching me, controlling everything. I can't think straight anymore." He knelt beside her, his voice calm and steady. "You're under a lot of stress, Amelia. Maybe you're imagining things." "I'm not," she snapped, her voice rising. "I saw it. I saw everything." Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Let's take a look together," he suggested. "We'll figure this out." Amelia hesitated, then nodded. But deep down, she felt a growing sense of dread. She was spiraling, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the feeling that someone, or something, was orchestrating her downfall. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye as she crumbled, his own expression unreadable. The next phase of his plan was in motion, and Amelia was falling into the abyss he had carefully crafted for her. Amelia sat in her studio the following morning, drained and hollow. She hadn't slept. The distorted messages and flashes of Marco's face haunted her every thought. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a potential threat. She decided to confront the situation head-on. She would contact the authorities, hire a cybersecurity expert, do whatever it took to regain control of her life. But as she reached for her tablet, it buzzed in her hand. A new video began to play. It was Marco, sitting in a dimly lit room, his face solemn. His voice was calm but cutting. "Amelia, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's over. You've destroyed everything. If you think you can manipulate me, you're wrong. I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." The video ended abruptly. Amelia's heart raced as the screen shifted to a live feed, a view of her studio, captured from a hidden camera. The footage showed her, sitting frozen at her desk, staring at the tablet in disbelief. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. "Check your email." Shaking, she opened her inbox. The top message was from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Everyone will know." She opened it, and her blood turned to ice. Attached were all the damning videos and messages between her and Marco, meticulously organized and time-stamped. Below the files was a single sentence. "You've made your choices. Now face the consequences." Panic set in. She called Ethan, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I need your help. Someone's targeting me. They have everything. The messages, the videos. They're going to ruin me." Ethan's voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "I'm on my way," he said. When he arrived, Amelia collapsed into his arms, tears streaming down her face. She showed him the email, her hands shaking. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. Ethan looked at the screen, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he said, "Whoever this is, they've planned this carefully. Someone who knows you, knows your secrets." His words struck her like a blow. "You think Marco? Or maybe it's someone else entirely." Ethan interrupted, his tone chillingly measured. Amelia froze, suddenly aware of a shift in his demeanor. She stepped back, studying his face. "Ethan, you don't think I deserve this, do you?" Ethan met her gaze, his eyes cold. "Do you?" The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time, Amelia realized the full extent of his knowledge. Her breath caught. "It was you," she whispered, barely audible. Ethan's expression didn't change. "You betrayed me, Amelia. You destroyed everything we built. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. A notification lit up the screen. Files sent to press, colleagues, investors. Amelia's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, clutching the tablet as though it could undo the damage. Her career, her reputation, her life, it was all crumbling in real time. Ethan stood over her, his voice cold and steady. "You'll remember this moment for the rest of your life. The moment you lost everything." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her choices. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within hours, Amelia's phone exploded with calls and messages. Friends, colleagues, and clients were demanding answers, their voices laced with anger and disbelief. The videos and messages Ethan had leaked spread like wildfire, making their way onto social media and industry forums. The headlines followed soon after. Renowned designer's scandalous affair rocks fashion world. Betrayal in high fashion. The downfall of Amelia Laurent. Amelia's once pristine reputation was in shambles. Investors began pulling out of her upcoming show, citing concerns over the controversy. Her clients, many of whom valued discretion and class, distanced themselves immediately. By midday, Amelia's studio was empty. Her assistants, unable to face the growing scrutiny, had quit without notice. Even the building owner called to inform her that the lease on the studio space was being terminated. Amelia sat alone in the now silent studio, surrounded by unfinished designs and mannequins dressed in works that would never see the runway. Her mind raced with questions. How could Ethan do this? How had she been so blind? Her tablet buzzed again. Another email from the anonymous sender, though she no longer needed to guess who it was. "Now they all know who you really are." Amelia threw the tablet across the room, the screen shattering against the wall. But the gesture brought no relief. The world outside was already judging her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The final blow came in the form of a press conference. Ethan, ever the picture of control, addressed the media that evening. Though he didn't explicitly name Amelia, his carefully chosen words painted a clear picture of betrayal and heartbreak. "I've always believed in integrity, both in business and in personal relationships," he said, his voice steady. "When that trust is broken, it's not just one person who suffers. It's everyone who believed in the vision." The message was clear. Amelia's betrayal had not only hurt him but also tarnished everything they had built together. Watching the broadcast from her apartment, Amelia felt the walls closing in. The public sympathy Ethan garnered only deepened her isolation. She had become a pariah in her own world, her name synonymous with scandal and shame. As the night fell, Amelia realized the full weight of her punishment. Ethan hadn't just exposed her secrets. He had dismantled her entire existence, leaving her with nothing but the hollow echo of her own choices. But the question lingered. Was there any way back from this? Amelia stayed locked inside her apartment for days, unable to face the world. The fallout from Ethan's carefully orchestrated revenge had reached every corner of her life. Former friends avoided her calls. Fashion houses that once fought to collaborate with her issued statements, distancing themselves from her unprofessional conduct. Social media was relentless. Every platform was filled with memes, cruel comments, and dissected timelines of her scandal. Her private life was now public entertainment. Desperate to salvage what remained of her career, Amelia contacted her legal team, but even they seemed hesitant to help. "There's no legal recourse here," one of her lawyers explained over the phone. "The leaked information wasn't fabricated, and you can't prove who sent it." Amelia knew the truth, of course, but how could she fight Ethan? He had built the very systems that had been used against her. She was outmatched, outsmarted, and utterly defeated. The bills began to pile up as clients canceled contracts and refunds were demanded for incomplete work. Her apartment, filled with once prized possessions, now felt like a cage. One night, she received a call from Marco. She hesitated before answering, unsure if she could handle another confrontation. "Amelia," he began, his voice cold, "I don't know what you thought this was, but I want nothing to do with you anymore. Whatever mess you're in, leave me out of it." The line went dead before she could respond. Amelia stared at the phone, tears streaming down her face. Even Marco, the one person she thought might understand, had turned his back on her. But the deepest cut came a week later, when Ethan filed for divorce. The papers arrived at her door, delivered by a courier who barely met her eyes. The terms were as cold as the man who had crafted them. Ethan's lawyers had ensured that Amelia would leave the marriage with nothing. The financial support he had once provided was now a distant memory. She signed the papers with shaking hands, knowing she had no choice. The silence of her apartment felt suffocating as she placed the pen down. She had lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her husband. The life she had built so meticulously was now in ruins. And Ethan? He thrived. His public image as a wronged husband brought him new opportunities, and his business ventures soared. The world saw him as the victim, a man who had risen above betrayal with dignity. But as Amelia sat alone, the realization dawned. Ethan hadn't just sought revenge. He had destroyed her in a way that ensured she could never recover. The days stretched into weeks, and Amelia's life became a shadow of what it once was. Her once bustling studio had been emptied, her luxurious apartment reduced to a silent, oppressive space. She avoided mirrors, unable to face the reflection of a woman she no longer recognized. Sitting on her worn couch one evening, she replayed the events in her mind, over and over again. Where had it all gone wrong? Was it the first stolen glance with Marco? The night she let passion override her judgment? Or was it the years of complacency in her marriage, the silent chasm that had grown between her and Ethan? The answer didn't matter anymore. The results were all that remained. Ethan had taken everything, her career, her reputation, and her sense of self. And yet, as much as she hated him, she couldn't help but wonder if she deserved it. She thought about the woman she had been before the betrayal, the person Ethan had once loved so deeply. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of that person, consumed by ambition, desire, and her own arrogance. She had thought she could have it all, keep all the plates spinning without consequence. But consequences had come, swift and brutal. Amelia picked up her phone, scrolling through news articles about her downfall. They painted a picture of a villain, a deceitful, manipulative woman who had betrayed a devoted husband. The media adored Ethan, portraying him as a tragic hero who had risen from the ashes of betrayal to rebuild his life. The narrative stung, but Amelia couldn't deny its truth. She thought about reaching out to Ethan to apologize, to explain. But what could she say that would make any difference? He had made his choice, just as she had made hers. For the first time in weeks, Amelia stood and walked to her balcony. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to her suffering. She gripped the railing, the cold metal biting into her palms, and let the night air wash over her. In that moment, she made a vow. She didn't know what the future held or if she could ever rebuild what had been lost. But she wouldn't let Ethan or anyone define her entirely by her mistakes. If she was going to find redemption, she would have to start from nothing. And she would have to do it alone. Months passed, and Amelia began the slow, painful process of rebuilding her life. She moved to a small, modest apartment in a quiet part of the city, far from the glamorous world she had once inhabited. Gone were the high-profile events, the glitz, and the adoration. What remained was a simpler, quieter existence. She took odd design jobs under a pseudonym, avoiding any connection to her tarnished name. These projects were small and unremarkable, but they were hers. For the first time in years, she worked without the pressure of public scrutiny, without the need to please investors or clients. The anonymity was liberating, though bittersweet. Ethan, meanwhile, thrived in the aftermath of their separation. His company launched a new suite of AI products that revolutionized the tech industry, earning him accolades and solidifying his place among the world's elite innovators. His public persona was untouchable, a man who had overcome betrayal and emerged stronger. But behind the scenes, Ethan wasn't untouched by his revenge. Late at night, in the silence of his sprawling home, he sometimes wondered if he had gone too far. He had destroyed Amelia not just as a punishment but as a way to soothe his own pain. And while his actions had brought him a grim sense of justice, they had also left him feeling hollow. Amelia, too, wrestled with the scars of what had happened. She knew she had been the architect of her downfall, but she also resented the cruelty with which Ethan had exacted his revenge. Trust, love, and forgiveness, concepts she had once believed in, now felt like distant, unreachable ideals. One day, while walking through a quiet park, Amelia spotted a couple sitting on a bench, laughing and holding hands. The sight stirred something in her, a pang of longing, mixed with a flicker of hope. She realized she wasn't done with life, even if life had done its best to break her. Her new designs began to reflect her journey. They were raw, imperfect, and deeply personal, unlike anything she had created before. Slowly, her work caught the attention of a niche audience, people who appreciated the authenticity of her creations. She didn't chase fame or fortune anymore. She simply wanted to create something meaningful. As for Ethan, he continued to excel, but the victories felt less sweet. He had won, yes, but the cost was a piece of himself he could never reclaim. He often thought of Amelia, not with hatred, but with a lingering sadness for what they had lost. Their paths never crossed again, but the memory of their story lingered like a faint scar. Both had been wrong, both had suffered, and both had been changed irrevocably. In the end, they became strangers once more, their lives moving forward on separate, uncharted paths.